Hey, what's up guys, my name is Cherno and welcome to episode 16 of Sparky Engine, in which we make a beautiful game engine from scratch in C++. So today we'll be talking about, last episode was horrendous. Well, not really, it's just that we spent so much time on Legacy OpenGL, which we're obviously going to get rid of right now. But anyway, today we're going to talk about getting our textures to work with the batch renderer. So basically, let's just look at what we achieved last episode. We achieved this texture, which is exactly what we had in our image, so everything is just the best. And if I were to draw a face on it and restart this, you can see it has that beautiful face, and everything's the best. So what we're going to do now is make it actually work with our 50,000 sprite renderer, okay, which is our batch renderer. So we need to actually basically get it to work with that, but also we want to prepare ourselves for next episode, which will be all about arrays of textures. So obviously if we have a sprite batch of 50,000 textures, we probably, let's just say that's like a tile map or something. 50,000 is such a ridiculously high example. Usually you wouldn't have that many unless you're doing stuff like particle engines, and we'll talk about that later, but usually you wouldn't have that many. But I imagine if you even had like 200 sprites on the screen, maybe this is like part of your like a tile kind of level map, right? And in your map you would have maybe some sand tiles, some river tiles, some water tiles, whatever, dirt. You'll have all those kind of tiles, and obviously they have different textures. So how do you set the texture per sprite? That's kind of what we're going to be covering in the next two episodes, this one and the next one. So the first step is setting this up with the actual batch renderer, so that the batch renderer knows how to interpret and apply certain textures to sprites. So to do that, let's get rid of a lot of the code that we wrote last time. I'll move this shader.enable. We had two shaders, didn't we, last time? So we're probably going to just get rid of most of this. We'll leave our cool lighting thing. So we'll leave. We just had light position, and that was it, right? So we'll get rid of like layer 2. I'm sure you all know how groups work now when we've covered that. We'll go back to like 50,000 sprites, maybe not that many though. But we'll get rid of this horrible legacy code. We'll have to revert our shaders as well in a minute, but let's get rid of the second layer completely. Let's get rid of, so we had that. Let's get rid of, we'll leave our texture as well. Let's get rid of layer 2. Let's get rid of our group testing code. To test 50k sprites can just go away now. Oops. And we were doing that. So I think this was doing less than 50k at this point. Let's get rid of the second shader. So we just got shader.enable, so we'll just get rid of that completely. We're just gonna basically just simplify a lot of this code now, because we don't need to be in quite a complicated position, let's just say. Let's just launch this, and our shaders are all wrong. Whoa. Is that an error? No. Huh, it's kind of working. Okay, let's go into our shaders and totally revert all that stuff. So we'll uncomment this. We will uncomment that. We will uncomment this, and our GL position will be back to, we'll restore all of our uniform defaults, and we'll get rid of this. So times ML matrix, should say times view matrix, times model matrix, times position. I think that's what it was. It should have been that. Great. Basic.frag. We'll go back to this, we'll get rid of this, and we'll bring back this. We'll leave the uniform sampler, because we'll need that anyway, and that should be all reverted now, and it's not really at all, but close. What's wrong with this? What's with that color? Oh, I got rid of something I shouldn't have. Mother duck. Oh, and also wrong like version. We're totally on the wrong version. But I got rid of something because what's color? Oh no, color's legit. Wait, that was the commented one, wasn't it? Was it? No, yes, it's just fsn.color, isn't it? Yeah, there we go. Okay, good. We're back. That's a lot of sprites, though. I don't want to render that many. That's way too complicated. Let's just do plus plus, right? That was a good amount of sprites, I believe. And then I think we just did, that, and that was like a reasonable amount of sprites to display, and it was nice. Yeah, that looks really nice. I like that a lot. So anyway, now that we've got this, not to mention the performance is great, now that we've got this going on, let's go ahead and actually set them up with textures. So how do we do that, right? Well, there's a few different things that we should set up. First of all, in our basic renderable, right now we're supporting just a vertex, right? A color, which we changed from being a vec4, which is 4 floats, 128 bits, into just 32 bits, into one unsigned int color, right? We can get rid of this now. Everyone knows how everything works there. So what we'll do is we'll move color down. Okay, so in between vertex and color, I'm actually going to set up a vec2, okay, which is going to be our text chord. I'm just going to call this UV, okay? So that might be a bit, bit of a bad name. I don't want to call it texture coordinate, because that's just too much. It's just too long. So I might just say, yeah, we'll call it UV. And then we'll just make a unsigned int. It doesn't need to be an int. It can be a short. It can be whatever it wants. But we'll just make an unsigned int called TID, which stands for texture ID. Okay, so we have two things, and this is going to be the case so that we can support arrays of textures. I might actually put that in next episode to keep this episode purely about one, and then the next episode we'll branch into arrays. But right now what we have is a UV. Okay, what this means is that I'm going to eat a grape. I hope that's not, making my professionalism seem less to you, but what this is going to be is, of course, the texture coordinate, essentially, so that we can apply the texture correctly to the triangles. Okay, but there we go. So this is per vertex, remember. So now we need to tell the batch renderer about this change. Luckily, what we did was we switched to using this offset of thing last time, or the time before last time, I don't know, where we use this actual color thing instead of actually manually specifying an offset in bytes. Because we did that, though, now that we've put UV in between these, we don't need to change color anymore, because it knows what color is now. So all we need to do is add one for the other thing. So shader color index, we had all this stuff. We should probably add one. I'll change color index now to be like 2, right? And I'll add one at index 1 called shader UV index. Okay, well, just swallow this grape real quick. So this UV index is going to be reflected in our shaders. We'll change this to be layout location 2 color. Okay, and then we'll just input 1 to be UV or something like that. So I'm sticking with UV just because that's usually the convention of that's usually the I guess the names that you would give texture coordinates, right, when you're doing them. So instead of like XY or whatever, you use UV. I think it's just a nice name that we can use, and everyone should basically understand what it means as well. It's just a quick, oh, UV, okay, those are the texture coordinates. Make sure they're vectors as well. Okay, cool. Anyway, let's close a bunch of this stuff because we really don't need it. Now that we've done that, in our batch renderer, we can copy and paste this, right? Make sure it's a 2 coordinate thing. It's going to be a shader UV index, right? It's going to be, is it going to be an unsigned byte? No, it's just going to be a gel float, okay? Normalized we'll set to false. Technically, it probably would be. We'll play around with that maybe. The stride is always going to remain the same, and then the offset is going to be the offset of UV. Okay, and that's it. That should be it. So make sure you don't forget to enable it, otherwise it won't work, and you'll cry probably. Maybe not, but I know I sure probably would. But there we go. So everything now is pretty good. I might split, now that we're getting somewhere in terms of code, I might split this up into nice chunks so that we can read our code easier. But everything looks pretty good. And then our next step is coming into here and actually pushing that data into the buffer. Okay. So right now our rendering is pretty much broken because it thinks like things that are different offsets, and this will probably just, okay, maybe not. Maybe it will just work. But we haven't actually specified anything to do with our actual, I should say, texture coordinates. So to do that, we need to basically tell sprites what they are, and probably tell renderables what they are as well. So we've got M size, we've got M position, and these are all things. We probably won't just have a texture coordinate kind of thing, right? Yes, and one thing I should mention actually is what the reason it did work is because of offset of. Okay, so it basically skipped UV. Like, as in, it didn't skip it, but it knew that it knew that there was a thing at UV, and it pushed that data, which was empty. But because it knows where color actually is, it only basically read those two. So if we had 0, 1, 2, right, it didn't read anything from 1, which was out of UV, it just read and wrote to 0 and 2, and since we only used that, we didn't have a problem. So that's why it worked, in case anyone was interested. But that's why offset of is the best. But anyway, to make this work, we basically want to be able to be like, oh, what is my texture coordinate, right? Or my UV. Now, there are a few problems with this, because UVs, we don't just have one of them. And we don't have like a size and a UV, we have 4 of them. So it would probably make more sense to store them in an array, or a vector, which is probably going to be the better option. So if I make a vector of vectors called UV, and then I retrieve it like so, that's probably going to be one of the best ways to actually do something like that. Now, what I'm going to do is, this is our default constructor here. What I'm going to do is basically set them up as a standard, just a standard vector of vectors, okay, and I'll call this MUV, okay? So I do want this to be written to by default though, so what I'll do is I'll actually expand this constructor here. We're not even using this one right now, by the way, so it's probably not use doing that. At least I don't think we're using it. Let's take a look at our sprite real quick. That's a static sprite. Static sprite's using it. Sprite, oh, Sprite is using it. What do you know? So we're not using the default constructor at all then. Okay, we'll do it for both constructors anyway, might as well. So back over here, we'll go ahead and basically just go muv.pushback maths. So we'll set up defaults, right? So we'll have 0, 0. I don't know. I usually start in the bottom left and render clockwise. So I will just change this to 1 and that to 0 and whatnot. And we'll set it up that way, just because that's how I roll. So I should probably make some kind of private void set UV defaults, which just does that, and then I'll just call that. Here and here. And I'll keep this nice and tight. Okay, so we'll paste that here and we should pretty much be done. Okay, so there we go. There's our beautiful adventure into basically getting default UVs. Let's make an inline thing called get UVs. I'm actually going to say UVs like that, or no, I won't. That just looks weird. So I'll just do this. Vector, okay. Make sure that you, of course, get the reference of it and you're not copying it. That would be horrific for performance. MUV. Okay, there we go. So that looks pretty good to me. If we go back into Batch Renderer, we should be able to access those UVs. And now all we need to do is set them up. So if we go ahead and, it doesn't matter which order you do them in, I'm just going to do them in the chronological order since that makes the most sense, but we're going to go ahead and say that it's equal to UV0 for the first one, and then 1, 2, and 3 essentially. So this part of it's pretty easy. With arrays of textures, I'm going to eat another grape, hopefully that's okay. With arrays of textures, the only difference is going to be that we'll have to also pass in an actual ID for the texture that we want to use. So if we have 10 textures, we might be like, I want to use texture number 5 or something. That's it. The UVs will stay the same, obviously. And everything else looks pretty good. So while I swallow my grape, so the next thing we need to talk about is shaders. We need to have, in our vertex shader, we need to handle these UVs because we need to pass them into the fragment shader. So to do that, what we essentially want to do is okay, let's see. Yeah, so what we essentially want to do is we want to call vsout dot uv equals uv. And then in frag, we'll call vector to uv here. And then if we want to basically set it equal, we want to set it to a texture. Well, first of all, we need that sampler, which we had from previous episode. But all we want to do really is just set color equal to basically just texture, okay, the texture we want, and then fsin.uv, and that is all we should do, and that will give us the thing. Now, this UV, this text, whatever, when we do arrays of textures, we'll have the actual texture that we want to select, and this will probably be an actual array as well. So we'll set that up next episode, but again, right now, this is just how it's going to work. Pretty simple, and it's pretty much open for working now. So we set our active texture being texture 0, okay? When we have arrays, we'll have more than that, but the idea is when we do something like texture 0, we have to pass 0 in here. I could have made this 1, for example, and then I have to pass in 1 here to the sampler, okay? That's how it works. So we'll just stick with 0 since that works. And we're not using, we don't need, yeah, we're only using 1, so everything else is the best. But what we'll do is, that looks pretty good. Okay, so really all we have to do now is launch it, and it should work. Let me just make sure that I'm doing all of that good stuff. I am. Let's just see what happens. And we're using the test texture. Okay, there we go. So yeah, that works perfectly. So if we wanted to make sure that it works perfectly, I mean it does, but first of all, let's add some lighting to it. So we'll just multiply it by intensity. That's all we have to do. Okay, we've got some lighting with it now, great. If I head over here and make something that's a bit better, let's just draw a black border around here to make sure that we're good, and we'll maybe draw a white border around the other part of it, okay? So, okay, that lighting makes it difficult to see, but that is working, which is great. So if I get rid of this real quick, we know that black and white, okay, great. So there we go. And I might just make the inside something a bit better, like, I don't know, that. What am I looking for? There we go. All right, so there we go. That looks pretty good to me. Looks like our texture is working and everything is the best. So there we go. That's going to basically wrap up how we can get our textures and stuff properly into the actual shaders and whatnot. We are overflowing a little bit, but that's okay. Everything else is looking pretty good. So next time we're going to talk about having arrays of textures, and everything will work out Okay, so let me quickly just explain this. The reason we want to raise the textures, for example, is because I want to be able to be like, I want this sprite to be this texture, and I want this sprite over here to be this texture. Now, unfortunately, we've only got one draw call, so it's not like we can set uniforms in between, right? We can't do that, because we're drawing this with one draw call. So it needs to be an attribute, and it needs to just be able to select from a list of textures it's got in its video memory, and be like, I want to apply this texture to this. To these two triangles, and that'll be our sprite. So that is how that's going to work. Get excited for that. It should be awesome, and I'll see you guys next episode. Goodbye.